The Green family is in Philadelphia today. We have one more day left here in Philadelphia. There's so much I want to see. There's some I haven't ever seen before, and there's a whole lot that my kids have never seen. Hey guys, everybody up? Yes, sir. Hey, listen, got a big surprise for you. Just found out we can probably get in, but it's going to be, they're close to closing. It's a place I've never been. I really want to go, and I want to surprise you guys with it. So since we're in Philadelphia, let's get in as much as we can in a short period of time.
Wait, where is it?
No, I'm not telling you. Actually, it's going to be a surprise. We're gonna have some fun with a little wager, see if you guys can figure out where we're going first. I'll explain in the car. Come on, let's go, let's go.
Rick Green coming to you live from the Lone Star State of Texas, a beacon of hope and freedom to liberty lovers around the world. Today, I'm thinking about why do we do what we do? Because everywhere we go as a family, when we're traveling and speaking, someone comes up to us and asks, where's the hope? Is it over for America? They genuinely feel like the stars and stripes are fading. I felt that. But when I look at my family, whether it's my son, Trey, and his drive to exceed expectations, or Reagan and his love for serving and teaching other people, Cameron and her determination to outperform her brothers in everything she does, or my little stagehound Rhett and his boundless enthusiasm. Through their eyes, I see a vibrant nation. When my children stand in the birthplace of the Constitution, or on battlefields where patriots gave their lives, I can see in them a rekindled flame of the American spirit. The future of my children's country is bright because it's built on the foundation of an incredible providential history. A history of patriots and pastors, entrepreneurs and freedom fighters, mothers, fathers, families like yours and mine, who chose to live like their nation depended on it. And it still does. Each of us, every individual, every family, has a duty to fight for freedom and add our voice to the American dream.
This is Lexington. We're at the house of the Reverend Jonas Clark. So this is the house.
So it's about midnight, and it feels like we have stepped back in time. It's an opportunity to relive the moment of Paul Revere's ride. We're standing right outside the home of one of my heroes, the pastor there, Jonas Clark.
Reverend Clark's the guy that starts the militia here. He's the one that calls these guys out. You got Sam Adams and John Hancock inside. Okay, that's why Paul Revere was coming to this house.
Because the British had a price on their head.
Yeah, they were after him. They knew Hancock was the troublemaker and Sam Adams was the troublemaker, so they wanted to shut him down.
This is actually why Paul Revere was coming to Reverend Clark's house, because he was the leader in that community. He was the one that started the militia there, and he had in his home John Hancock and Sam Adams.
Okay, that's just cool.
You hear Paul Revere yelling, "The regulars are out!" And I mean, my heart was racing. Cameron and I both were like, we've got to warn people.
I did get chills, but they were not from the cold. They were from Paul Revere riding down that road, going to warn Reverend Clark.
All right, Mr. Hancock! Mr. Adams! Mr. Hancock! Mr. Adams urges us at this hour. Revere, it's you.
The regulars are out. Hundreds of them fully equipped. They've been rowed across the river to Cambridge.
Seeing a reenactment firsthand just sears it into your memory. You will never forget it. It is so much more than reading it in a book.
It's an opportunity to be transported back in time and relive that special day that really started America.
I have the utmost confidence that this noble struggle for liberty will conclude gloriously for America.
Well done, sir.
That's neat.
All right.
I love coming to Philadelphia. I mean, if I have a favorite place, it's either here or Williamsburg. There's a lot of history here in Philadelphia. And there's one place in Philadelphia I've never been, always wanted to go, have told the story about it for years. My kids have talked about it. They've never been, so I wanted to surprise them.
Yeah, so our dad gets us together. He actually doesn't tell us where we're gonna go, so we're all having to guess it. And whoever guesses where we're going and gets it right actually gets $10.
Yeah, so it's another wager.
Yeah.
Cameron and Rhett's tactic was to just blurt out answers about where they'd heard my dad speak about, some of which aren't even in Philadelphia.
The Alamo!
No. We're a little bit far away from the Alamo. So listen, so if you guess it before we actually walk in and you see the name, then you get the $10.
Which presentation have you talked about it
In almost every presentation I've ever given. That's the only clue I'm giving you so far, okay? So
It has to do with the Founding Fathers?
It has to, well, I can't even tell you that. All right, let's go, come on.
Oh,
we don't have
gosh.
long because they're gonna close soon. I looked up online
Let's
what time
go.
they close.
Well, let's not.
But I'll give you another hint. It has to do with history.
Okay.
My dad was kind of giving a little bit of hints on the way. He was like, it's just around the corner now, let's all stay together.
Can you narrow it down for me? Here, is it a church?
It is not a church.
Was anything signed there?
Oh my gosh.
Was anything signed there?
No more clues.
No more
clues.
My tactic, of course, was to get to the place before anyone else could and guess it, so I got my running in that day.
It's not Independence Hall, it's not Congress Hall.
Todd House! It's the Todd House! No.
No? Todd House, what?
No, it's not the Todd House.
Okay, fine.
Rhett wants that $10, man.
Now, my brothers and sisters just kind of started thinking physically. Oh, we got to run, we got to get to where we're going. But Dad's kind of raised us to think outside of the box, to kind of think, you know, with our head a little bit.
Of course, Trey's tactic, I think, still now is cheating. He looked it up on Google, and as Brad Stein says, everybody is a professor with Google.
Is Google within the rules?
Yes, it is.
You totally cheated, man.
Hey, I play to win, all right? I use whatever means are necessary. Now, wait, is this the
let's
first
huddle up over here.
Oh my gosh.
Pretty simple way, in my opinion. And I ended up figuring out there was Carpenter's Hall, and I won the wager, which my siblings were not happy about.
So Trey guessed the name of the
By
location.
cheating.
All right, is Google cheating?
It was within the rules.
What is your case for why you were able to use Google instead of going and finding it?
I'm going to appeal to your attorney side, all right? You listed the rules specifically. If we could guess the name of the building before we actually got there and saw the sign, then we won.
I did.
I used the resources that were at
Nobody
hand.
expected you to use Google. I'm gonna up the ante, okay? He got the name of the location, okay? Rhett did figure out what actually happened here, but what is it that happened in this building that I talk about in every presentation that I give?
Bill of Rights.
No. What was so significant that happened in the first 3 days they were here?
Of the British are over.
So one of the members suggested that they start.
A prayer, and a Bible study. Yeah, I got it.
So Rhett gets the
Nicely done,
second
bud.
$10.
Nicely
All right,
done.
good job. Okay, so let's go inside and we'll see where it happened. You guessed it right.
Yeah, so a bunch of times in my dad's speeches, we hear about Carpenter's Hall, is where the first Continental Congress was taking place.
So this is really where it all began in terms of a legislative process, and it's where the first prayer in Congress happened. So just imagine, all those guys are in here. Patrick Henry is here, George Washington is here, John Jay is here, Samuel Adams is here, all these cool guys from the Revolution. And what surprised me the most going inside was how small it was, thinking about the fact, you know, like the signers of the Declaration, there were actually 56 guys, 56 delegates at that first Continental Congress. So it was a lot of guys crammed into a small space. So all those guys have gathered here, and one of them gets up and says, let's start with a prayer. And you remember the response? No, wait, we've got every denomination possible here. So who was it that stood up? Samuel Adams, so the father of the American Revolution, stands up and says, I'm no bigot, I can pray with every man in this room, right? Okay. So this was something they actually did together. This was a corporate prayer together. So all these guys from across the country, for the first time beginning to think of themselves as a nation. And here they were coming together, and to start that with a prayer is powerful.
Something that my dad told me is that George Washington knelt the whole 3 hours of the prayer.
Patrick Henry was kneeling, George Washington was kneeling. Others said those guys never left their knees during that whole prayer. So the fact that he was already that early in the Revolution on his knees asking God to intervene.
Experts say that the Founding Fathers were atheists and deists, but it seems kind of unusual that these atheists and deists would be praying for 3 hours and having a Bible study.
Nobody talks about that anymore. Even the guys who are giving tours there at Carpenter's Hall, they don't really talk about the faith of the Founding Fathers. They don't talk about what happened in that building that was so instrumental in the Revolutionary War. And that's why we do what we do. We go around, we talk about this kind of stuff that's pretty much unknown to most people.
All right, guys, so was that worth it? Was that cool?
Heck yes.
But here's what I want you to remember. Out of all the stuff that happened here, to fit with our theme for where we're headed next, remember, I want you to picture George Washington kneeling there, praying with all those guys. All right, 3-hour prayer, studying out of Psalms 35. So one of the places I absolutely had to bring the kids is Freedom's Foundation in Valley Forge. We're right next door to where Washington and the Revolutionary Army camped in 1777, and this place was actually founded by Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Their purpose and their goal at Freedom's Foundation is for
civic education, and they really feel like today's generation is not getting the civic education in their schools that they need. And so they're going out and educating kids not just at Valley Forge, but they're also taking programs into schools all across America.
You know how the Pledge of Allegiance has under God in it?
Yes.
All right, that happened in 1954, and there's a reason Eisenhower did that. He wanted to distinguish between American freedom and communism. Communism says no God, everything comes from government. And our system of freedom in America says it comes from God, and then we set up government to protect that freedom, right? So that was why he did that in 1954, and then he helped to start this foundation that was all about protecting the principles of America. So it's the same stuff we do now, traveling the country. They had the same concerns 50 years ago, and they started this foundation. And this monument right here is gonna explain exactly what they're all about. So let's run over here and take a look at it.
So one of the really neat things at Freedom's Foundation is they have this big monument, and they have it inscribed with what they call the Bill of Responsibilities.
I love what they did. I mean, this is exactly what we teach. At the very base of it, you gotta have a fundamental belief in God. So God is the source of our freedom. That's why we talk so much about the Creator in our founding documents. So there you go, that's the base. And then next, check this out, constitutional government sustained by the active participation of the citizens. So guys, this sums up what we do. This is what our family's all about. This is what we go around the country to do, to teach people that they gotta be active and that they gotta maintain a government based on a belief in God. And then they go through all these great details, the Bill of Responsibilities.
I personally like the Bill of Responsibilities. I take duty very seriously. And for those of us who know the Bill of Rights, we love it. But we also need to know the Bill of Responsibilities.
Freedom will not protect us. We have to protect freedom. So you and you and you and you and you, we all have to actually personally defend freedom. That's good. All right, what else?
I like the third one on the second half.
Third one on the second half?
To share with others our appreciation of the benefits and obligations of freedom. Freedom shares, freedom strengthens.
That's great.
Is it like what we're doing too, going around and sharing? Freedom?
Exactly right, exactly right. So when you tell somebody else you appreciate your freedom, you make them start thinking about, wait a minute, maybe I should be appreciating my freedom. So that's exactly what, man, this is good stuff, guys. How is this not, how do we not already know about this? How does every family not have this hanging in their home?
You can actually go to their website at freedomsfoundation.org, and they will have a PDF that you can print it out. And so we got home, I printed it out, I've given the Bill of Responsibilities to my kids, and I think they are something that every family should live by. They're that good.
Check out that flag, guys.
Holy smokes.
Rhett, you think you can climb up there?
I would love to try.
Yeah.
Hey, Dad, go check this out.
Ah, who do you think that is?
It's like Adams in the
looks
middle.
Like Franklin,
Franklin
maybe
middle.
Jefferson. I don't know who the one on the left
That's
is.
got to be Franklin in the middle.
What do you see on that, Rhett?
It's even got wording on it, like
Okay,
the
so
actual wording.
So what's it say?
A declaration.
You're gonna get us thrown out of here.
Let's see, a declaration.
So what does that make you think of? A declaration?
Yeah, the
Declaration of what?
Independence.
Of independence. There you go. So this got to be Jefferson then. So he's holding his. But check it out. It does
It's
have
even
words
scratched
scratched out. So this would be his original draft, not the final declaration. So I wonder if these guys are praying over the draft before they go in. That's interesting.
That was really cool, but just to get to see what all came from his heart and what he wrote, and then all the people that complained about it and wanted him to change it. And so it actually shows the line scratching through and what he had to change.
And they started marking it up and changing it, and it really unnerved him because he spent so much time, and it was his heart and soul coming out on that paper.
He said they mangled my declaration. He was not happy about the changes because, remember, he spoke out against slavery in the Declaration originally. He had a lot of very harsh things to say about it. Even though he was a slave owner himself, he grew up around it, but he hated it. And he talked about that in the Declaration. They took all that out. A lot of people are very confused on Jefferson. Frankly, I get confused on Jefferson because in his long life, he wrote a lot of different things. But at the time of the founding of America, he was actually very anti-slavery, and he put it in the original draft of the Declaration. Even as a guy that grew up around slavery, was a slave owner himself in a state that did not legally allow him to free his slaves. It sounds like a real contradiction, but when you read his writings and you read what happened back then, he was a great champion for getting rid of slavery and actually did a lot in the state of Virginia, both as a legislator and as governor, to move towards that direction of ending slavery and helping the slaves. Anybody find Washington yet? I know it's around here because they got that Medal of Honor grove down there. I think, Does anybody see it?
Oh,
I see it. There's one particular thing here at Freedom's Foundation that you have to see, and this is what I really brought the kids to see. But it's a big campus, and we hadn't got there yet, and it's a pretty good walk to get over there, but this is the one we don't want to miss. So you've heard me talk before, right, about George Washington in prayer, not only here, I mean, we see him kneeling here, but the stained glass window at the chapel that's right down the road, he's kneeling in prayer. In Washington, D.C. at the Capitol, in the private prayer room of the congressman, it's Washington kneeling in prayer. We've seen paintings of him. And don't forget, it's not just that somebody decided to do a monument later. You read the guys that spent time with him. Henry Knox served with him throughout the Revolutionary War. He talks about walking in on General Washington in his tent, kneeling in prayer. Secretary Thompson in Congress talks about witnessing Washington kneeling in prayer. And some people say he never did this. Some people actually claim he wasn't even a Christian or a person of faith. His own adopted daughter, Nellie Custis Washington, said that to question George Washington's Christianity would be like questioning his patriotism. So think about that. Nobody's going to question George Washington's patriotism, right? I mean, this is the patriot of all patriots. You're not going to question his patriotism. She said you also shouldn't question his Christianity, that it was extremely strong. And remember how we started all this? How we went to Carpenter's Hall and we saw where the First Continental Congress was? So long before he was encamped here at Valley Forge, he was actually on his knees with those other founders praying about what was to come, because they knew what was going to happen if they ended up in war with Great Britain. So then fast forward from that time, really 3 years and a couple of months, to where he's here at Valley Forge. And the story behind him praying, the reason this is here and the reason you see the paintings of him at Valley Forge praying, is because while he was out there praying, a guy that lived here, in fact, one of his houses was actually used by the generals to live in, actually stumbled upon Washington praying. And he said that when he saw Washington praying, he had been a Tory, which means he was for Great Britain. He wasn't for America. So remember, a lot of Americans were with Great Britain. So you had a large number of Americans. In fact, about 100,000 fled at the end of the war whenever Great Britain lost. So there was a lot of people that were for the Brits. Well, one of the guys that was for the British saw him praying, and he said he changed from being a Tory to a Whig, went home and told his wife, said, we're supporting the wrong cause, because when somebody prays like that general's praying, God's going to answer their prayers, and he's going to win. And so he literally switched his allegiance because of the way he saw George Washington praying.
It was July of 1776, right here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the building right behind me, where 56 men pledged their lives, fortunes, and their sacred honor. Their actions in Independence Hall birthed freedom on paper, but a war still had to be won to make that freedom a reality in the lives of Americans. Here in the cradle of liberty, self-evident, never-changing truths met ink and paper. And out there, all across the 13 colonies, those ideas would be paid for with blood, sweat, and tears. Just 2 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, 14-year-old Maddie Holt finds herself in the middle of a brutal war for independence, struggling to find her own purpose in the American Revolution. Maddie is the resolute daughter of Colonel John Holt. While awaiting her father's return from the battlefront, Maddie's world is upended by a mysterious messenger with a letter from the colonel. Forced to fight her own battle for heart and home, her intrigue with the charming young officer is cut short by the chilling news found within the letter. Royal Dragoons are headed to her home of River Springs, North Carolina, threatening Maddie and everyone she loves. Loaded with gripping adventure and a story of sacrificial love, The Patriot's Daughter will inspire you as Maddie Holt discovers what it truly means to fight and love like a patriot.
Well, my kids have told the story of the crossing of the Delaware for a long time, but they've never actually been there. So I love getting to surprise them and actually take them to the very place where Washington crossed the Delaware. So now when they tell the story, they can actually see in their own minds what that location is. It makes it so much more real for everybody. So no tour guide, guys. It's just us. We're going to figure this out on our own.
Let's do
You're a
it.
tour guide.
Let's go. Okay, so let's check it out and see if this tells us anything.
Now, Dad, which side are we on right now? Is this the side
Hey, these
they
are
were
the
on?
9 miles to trip.
We're on the Pennsylvania side. Okay, so we're starting off right here. All right, that bridge that's across there. So there was no bridge, right? So they literally had to get in the boats and cross. Let's go down and look at where they crossed. I mean, just think about it. You're walking, you're retracing the steps of George Washington and all those guys. And just imagine now, by this point, as you're going down here to get in the boats, you know what you're about to do. You're about to go attack the Hessians, who y'all always say, what do y'all say in your presentation? They're like the what?
Elite for hire.
They're like the Navy SEAls.
Like the Navy SEAls. So you're gonna cross, you know what's at stake. So you're walking down here, you see the storm, all right? It's snowing. Some of you don't even have shoes on, and you're looking at that river and the ice and the storm is raging, and you know that you're gonna have to cross that. And even if you make it to the other side, you're gonna have to march 9 miles in the snow, no shoes, wrapping their feet in burlap, and you're gonna have to march 9 miles to then fight guys that are far better trained than you. We're able to kind of walk through exactly what they went through, starting at 4 in the afternoon, and it took them 12 hours to get everybody across that river, which was hard to visualize, because when you're sitting there looking at a pretty calm river in good weather, you'd think they could have got in and got across everybody within an hour.
So you're saying they just crossed this end right here? So it took 12 hours just to cross this?
Yeah, so imagine that.
I thought it took 12 hours to cross.
Not to get the 9 miles. No, just to get from here to there.
Wow.
Because you're having to load all the troops and load the horses and load the cannons.
Yeah, 2,400
in
troops.
In these not even, they're flat boats. They're not even the kind, in the painting, it's a curved boat, but it was actually more likely that they were flat boats. People, I mean, they could have fallen off the side when they're hitting the ice and the cold.
I was thinking it took that long to go across here, but then they just went across.
Yeah, so they just went across.
Wow.
So I'm standing there talking to Cameron, and we're looking at the beautiful scenery and talking about what happened there and having kind of a father-daughter moment, and I'm thinking everybody else is still right behind me listening to what I'm saying, and I turn around and we're the only ones there. They've all disappeared.
Where'd they go?
Why is it just you and me? Well, I guess my tour must not be very exciting.
We decided to go to the real thing down here.
You're actually on the river. Hey guys, you lost your tour guide here.
Hey.
Y'all decided to do your own thing?
Our tour guide was a little boring for our taste. We like to experience the real thing here.
Now, if we just had a boat, we could actually get in it, and I could sit up front like George Washington. Hey, that rock might work. I got an idea. Everybody come over here. So my favorite part, though, of actually getting there, we found this one big rock, and all I could think about was that famous painting of Washington crossing the Delaware with Prince Whipple and Oliver Cromwell in the front of the boat. They've got the oars. Washington's looking majestic, and I had to have my Washington moment. So I found this rock. We're just about, we're right in front of the water, so I had to get my foot up there and pretend I was Washington. We are crossing the Delaware.
I'll be the horse.
The Green family crosses the Delaware. All right, so guys, seriously, let's think about what it would have been like. And you remember where we just went? Where'd we go earlier today?
Carpenter's Hall.
Carpenter's Hall, and what happened there?
The First Continental Congress.
First Continental Congress. What did I want you to remember from that?
The prayer.
The prayer. So George Washington on his knees praying. He had no idea at that time that he would end up here. And remember what happens before the crossing. They lose battle after battle after battle. This is almost like a Hail Mary pass in a football game. This is like, Washington is deciding to do something that no one thinks is possible. In fact, the British are packing up to go home because nobody fights in the winter. So he's actually going against all the normal rules of engagement. He's going against what they expect him to do. They never thought that the Americans would cross that icy river and come attack them on Christmas days. Then secondly, he gets down here, he realizes how bad the weather is. They hadn't planned on a snowstorm and the horrible weather that was going to happen. And so he gets in the middle and he still decides to go forward. So without that life of prayer and that life of understanding that God is sovereign, I don't think there's any way he would have got in that boat and crossed that river and put all those lives at risk.
It was quite moving because for me, it brings the story to life for me, and I can actually see the soldiers, underclothed, underfed. They were malnourished, they didn't have shoes, they were tired, they were defeated, they felt defeated, and yet they still did that for George Washington because of the love they felt for him as their leader and because they believed in him.
It was so cool to actually get to walk down to there and actually see where they crossed and that icy Delaware River and the blizzard, and we just got to imagine all the snow and the icebergs floating around there.
So down there you can actually see that little island right there. That's where they hid the boats, behind that island. Okay. So you look back here and you can see what it probably looked a lot like this except with snow and ice, right? But then you look off this side, hey, we got an actual bridge, we got cars coming across. This represents American ingenuity and the results of the American spirit 200 years later because of what they did right here 237 years ago on Christmas Day 1776, we're able to enjoy all the things that America offers to us. Well, what do y'all think? We actually got to see where it happened. Was that worth the trip to go see where the Delaware was crossed?
No, absolutely.
And you think that'll help you when you're up on stage telling the story?
Yeah, just a little bit.
I really think that just getting to walk where George Washington has walked, like at Carpenter's Hall, Valley Forge, and the Delaware Crossing, getting to walk where he was and realizing that everywhere that he went, he was praying. I personally think that it's made my presentation, our family's presentation, so much better. The scene is Christmas Day, 1776, on the edge of Pennsylvania. On one side of the Delaware River is what remains of the ragtag American army after months of experiencing defeat after defeat. Just 9 miles on the other side of the riverbank are 1,500 Hessian professional soldiers.
By this time, General Washington has already retreated from New Jersey and Pennsylvania. In fact, the war is going so terribly that the Continental Congress has fled Philadelphia in fear of the British approach. Scores of American troops have either been killed, wounded, or captured. Supplies lost, strategic spots lost, everything that could have gone wrong has gone wrong. I mean, the Americans, they're lacking food, they're lacking warm clothing, many of them are completely shoeless. They're cold, worn out, and defeated.
Then on the other side of the river, you have the Hessians, who are elite troops for hire. These guys are trained mercenaries, having fought with valor at the Battle of Long Island, the Battle of White Plains, and the taking of Fort Washington. These guys are the Navy SEALs of their day, and Washington decides to attack them. Really?
I mean, think about this. This would be like the local Boy Scout troop taking on SEAL Team 6.
On our trip to Delaware, our family was able to stand on those riverbanks and walk where Washington walked in those final moments leading up to the mission.
Historian and former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, wrote a great book on that evening called To Try Men's Souls. And he tells it better than anyone, so we're going to quote his retelling of that evening. Speaker Gingrich put it this way.
By Christmas Day 1776, when Washington's army had collapsed from 25,000 to 2,500.
Now let's think about that. That means that less than 1 in 1,000 Americans had the courage to stand with Washington on Christmas Day.
1/3 of those American soldiers had no boots. They wrapped their feet in burlap and left a trail of blood marching the 9 miles to Trenton.
Washington decided to cross an icy river at night in the middle of a snowstorm to surprise the 1,500 professional German soldiers waiting on the other side. In less than 1 hour, the Americans won an incredible victory. Not a single American soldier was lost, and 900 of the Hessians were captured.
The next 10 days saw the greatest military comeback in history as Washington's ranks swelled to 15,000 in just 2 weeks.
The password that night was victory or death. They were committed to the cause. The circumstances around them did not dictate their destiny. The events and defeats of the previous 5 months were not nearly as important as how they responded to those defeats.
Because it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you. And freedom is worth the fight.
So next time you guys are tired, frustrated, or just feel like you can't handle one more person telling you no,
we need to remember that this country was created by men and women who were willing to say victory or death while marching in burlap bags in the middle of a snowstorm. America needs another generation like that because freedom is worth the fight.
we need to be like Washington, constantly on our knees in prayer, so that we never have to live on our knees before kings, despots, and tyrants who tell us that they know better.
Washington didn't just go to God in the last minute because he was in a tough spot. He lived on his knees, praying and asking God to guide him in his steps, because duty is ours, and the results are God's.
We are going to have to commit ourselves to the cause of freedom and take the same kind of bold actions those patriots took when they crossed the icy Delaware River.
George Washington, everybody knows him, everybody loves him, that's why we have dollar bills.
George Washington's ambush. Everybody dies but him. And he sends a letter to basically start a myth that he was, ready? Bulletproof.
Things tend to kind of get exaggerated over time. You know, stories kind of get changed a little bit.
But we want to get back to the actual original writings. We're very blessed to have access to some original materials that take us all the way back to the actual year when these things happened. Some of these are late 1700s, 1800s. Some of them are history books. Some of them are journals. So everybody just dig in.
Ah, I love it. They're talking about the battle afterwards and how all the officers were shot down. And it says the Indians afterwards noted that they had specially noticed Washington's bearing and conspicuous figure and repeatedly shot at him, but at length they became convinced that he was protected by an invisible power.
That doesn't prove it's miraculous. It simply proves that everybody there knew something odd was at hand.
Okay, so listen, guys. But by the all-powerful dispensations of providence, I have been protected beyond all human probability or expectations. For I had 4 bullets through my coat and 2 horses shot under me, yet escaped unhurt, although death was leveling my companions on every side of me.
Who's this letter to?
That's Washington. He's writing to his brother.
So it says 63 officers out of 86 were killed or disabled.
August 17, 1755, this is Samuel Davies' sermon. So this is only a month after the battle. I beg leave to point the attention of the public to that heroic young Colonel Washington, whom I cannot but hope Providence has preserved for some great service to this country.
Everybody's saying this is impossible. This is the stories we want. So now we're beginning to accumulate evidence, and we haven't even gone there yet.
Yeah.
You know what I'm thinking? Pennsylvania. All right, you're telling me this is it?
This is it, man. This is what we've been reading about, all that research we've been doing. This is Braddock's Road. This is the scene. We've got 800 of the enemy around us. When that first volley hits from the French, they have no idea where it's coming from. They can't see them. It's like they're being rained down on with lead. One by one, officers are falling from these horses. Out of 80-something officers, 63 get taken out. They're either killed or wounded. But Washington, let's talk about Washington, okay? Yeah. Here's a guy that's 6'4". He's, almost a foot taller than everybody else. So your average soldier's about 5'4". I mean, he stands head and shoulders above everybody. So just imagine if you're the Indian, if you're sitting out there and you're gonna pick somebody to shoot, who are you aiming for?
Yeah, the easiest target.
Easiest target. And for some reason, they can't get him.
Just imagine this from the Indians' perspective. You've had tremendous success taking down every officer you fire at. But this one guy, you keep firing at him and he won't go down. Finally, someone takes a shot at Washington and he falls.
But it's the horse that goes down, not Washington. He pops right back up, gets on another horse. They take out that horse. He comes back on another horse. He finds out later he's been hit 4 times. He's got 4 bullet holes in his jacket, but they never pierce his flesh. Why? What made him special? Why was it that he survived when these other officers did not?
Either there's some kind of divine providence over this country and the people that started it, or he got lucky.
Let's recreate the situation. You'll be Washington.
I'm Washington.
You're Washington,
wait.
yes.
Uncle Brad comes out looking all stoic and regal, straightening his hat and his scarf.
Look at that.
This is perfect.
Had my cool colonial hat, my cool colonial vest, my cool colonial this.
Yeah, those are the 1755 specials. Adidas, is that an Indian name?
And my cool colonial scooter that I got to take back and forth, representing my cool colonial horse.
We're gonna have to load one at a time, so with no hopper, right? We can't rapid fire at you. But there's only 6 of us. There were 600 Indians, and the battle was 3 hours.
Yes.
We're only gonna have about 3 minutes.
So the test starts off, and it only takes about 2 or 3 seconds before we instantly start hitting Brad.
I was really surprised at how fast we started landing our shots center mass on Brad.
He had headshots, he had thoracic shots, he was in the arm. He was dead, no doubt.
When you see overwhelming evidence, and then you actually put it to the test and you combine all of that, there is no question that something preserved Washington in this battle.
I think most people they look at something like this and they're skeptical. I mean, we even started off skeptical, saying, how could you survive that? What would be so different? But you can't let yourself get so caught up in reason that the reason stands in the way of the truth, that you're not even willing to accept the truth that something miraculous happened here, and we see evidence of it right here.
There's 3 things I took away from this from my end. 1, I was surprised how many times you hit me. I mean, remember we were out on the road, I thought, I don't know how easy it's gonna be to hit a moving target. These are not accurate, and I didn't want to get hit. 2, how much it hurt. I got hit in the stomach, I got hit in the kidney, I got hit in the side, then you knocked off my hair. But you know what it tells me too, number 3? The courage. Yeah. Because when it starts hurting, I'm like going, I kind of want to be done now.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have men falling beside you dying. You have men screaming in agony. And a man stands up and says, we need to finish this battle. There's something more to Providence than simply maybe surviving being shot. Courage, character, virtue, that's not something that you can manufacture. It comes out in the time when you need it or you don't have it. That's the measure of a man.
All of the first-hand accounts say the exact same thing. The French reports after the battle, the Indians and what they said about the battle, Washington and other British after the battle, and then the physical evidence confirms their reports.
Put a little history, a little research, a little science together, and I think what we've proven is miracles are possible.
Hey friends, Rick Green with today's Constitutional Minute. I'm actually going to be taking our Constitutional Minute today right out of the Founders Bible. If you don't have one of these, I strongly encourage you to get one. It's a phenomenal tool. David Barton, I think, probably his most important thing that he's ever put out. And there's something about reading God's Word, and inserted into that are articles where you get the founder's perspective on that particular scripture. It's really powerful. In this case, it's actually something I was reading just this morning. We're actually in studio for doing some other Constitutional Minutes. I said, we got to stay over for one more because of what I read this morning in the Founder's Bible. It's a quote from Sam Adams, and this is so powerful. Sam Adams, known as the father of the American Revolution, a very important founding father. And here's what he said. But as you hear these words, think about them in today's generation, not just his generation. I think it's applicable to us today. Here's what he said. The liberties of our country, the freedom of our civil constitution are worth defending at all hazards, and it is our duty to defend them against all attacks. We've received them as a fair inheritance from our worthy ancestors. They purchased them for us with toil and danger and expense of treasure and blood, and transmitted them to us with care and diligence. It will bring an everlasting mark of infamy on the present generation, enlightened as it is, if we should suffer them to be wrested from us by violence without a struggle, or to be cheated out of them by the schemes of false and designing men. Friends, he basically just said, we have been given the torch of freedom. Actually in our case, multiple previous generations paid the price to preserve that torch. And then they pass it to us. It's the inheritance that we've been given from those who came before us. And it is our duty, our responsibility to preserve and protect it. What did he call it? He said the freedom of our civil constitution. Our Constitution. If there's anything I could say in a Constitutional Minute that's important, is that the Constitution must be defended by you and by me. And that's what Sam Adams just said. He said if we allow those freedoms to be basically, taken away from us through schemes of politicians today, without even using violence, by passing laws and changing the culture in a way that can take away your freedoms, that we should be embarrassed, that it'll be a horrible mark on us, that we'll be handing a torch to the next generation that's not even lit. That freedom will have been gone. Folks, we have a duty and responsibility. Thank you, Sam Adams, for speaking to us today from the grave all these generations later and reminding us of the price that he and his generation paid for freedom. There's so many generations before us paid, and that we have a responsibility to preserve and protect it. Friends, I encourage you, visit wallbuilders.com today. Get you a Founder's Bible. You will so enjoy reading God's Word and learning from the Founding Fathers at the exact same time. I'm Rick Green. Thanks for joining me today on today's Constitutional Minute.